I was 31 years old, the first time a bishop looked at me like I was already a liability. That was 2 months before he sent me to Millbrook Falls, a parish so small the diocese had stopped listing it on the printed map of assignments. The kind of scary stories priests only trade after their third glass of wine at a retreat house. Never sober, never on the record. I didn't know that yet. I only knew I'd been given a rectory with a leaking roof and a congregation of 41 people who called me Father Doyle and refused every single one of them to look me in the eye when they said it. I noticed the habits before I noticed anything wrong. Monsignor Achebe, the man I was replacing, had a way of locking the sacristy door twice, once with the key, and then again a second later with his shoulder pressed against the wood, as if the lock itself needed a witness. He counted the hosts in the tabernacle every evening at the same hour, whispering the number under his breath, like a man finishing a rosary he didn't want anyone to overhear. When I asked him about it during our 2 days of handover, he told me it was just habit, old habit. Then he changed the subject with a smoothness that felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced changing that particular subject for years. Not superstition, not exhaustion, not the ordinary paranoia of a tired old priest counting down his last weeks in a parish he was glad to leave. I watched him for 2 days, and none of those explanations fit the way he moved through that building, the way his eyes went to the bell tower every time the wind picked up, the way he never, not once, walked past the confessional after dark without touching the wood of the doorframe first. On my last night before he drove away for good, he handed me a cigar box. Wood, not cardboard. The hinges had rusted into a permanent painful angle, like they'd been forced open and shut too many times by someone in a hurry. There was a rubber band around it, the old kind that had gone brittle and split when I tried to remove it. No label. No writing on the lid at all, which felt wrong somehow, because everything else in that sacristy had a label. Inside were 3 items: a rosary with the crucifix filed down to a smooth, faceless nub, a photograph, badly water-damaged, showing the church basement with something blurred at the edge of the frame that might have been a person and might have been nothing, and a folded index card, the kind used for recipes, with 6 lines written on it in 4 different sets of handwriting, each one added years apart, like a chain letter no priest had dared to break. I read the first line by the dome light of my car in the empty parking lot. Do not let the basement door stay open past sundown, even for air. I sat there a long time. Something about that sentence, so specific, so mundane, so clearly written by a man who had learned it the hard way, made my chest go tight in a way sermons never had. The world before it broke was a quiet one. Millbrook Falls smelled like wet limestone and diesel from the paper mill 3 miles out, and the church itself smelled like beeswax and the particular mustiness of hymnals nobody had opened since Easter. I settled in the way any new pastor does, learning which pew creaked, which parishioners needed to be visited before Sunday, or they'd stop coming altogether. The first crack didn't come from the basement door. It came from the organ, an ancient Wurlitzer that had been silent for a decade. No organist left in town who could play it. 3 weeks into my assignment, I heard it playing at 2 in the morning. Not a hymn, something slower, a single note held far too long, then another, like someone testing keys they'd never touched before. That was the last night I slept without checking the locks twice myself. I have never told anyone what happened with the second line on that card. It read, "Feed nothing that knocks before it speaks." I thought it was a riddle until the night Ezra Colton showed up at the rectory door at 11 o'clock, a boy from 3 farms over, 9 years old, soaked from a storm that hadn't reached town yet by the sound of the weather radio. He knocked 3 times, waited, and only then said my name through the door, perfectly calm, in a voice pitched slightly wrong, like a recording of a boy's voice played back at the wrong speed. I opened the door out of instinct before I remembered the card in my desk drawer. The porch was empty. The rain that had soaked through his clothes, according to the boy standing there, had not fallen on the porch steps, on the mailbox, on anything but him. I gave him a towel. I gave him cocoa. I called his parents, and his mother arrived 20 minutes later, furious and frightened in equal measure, insisting Ezra had been asleep in his bed the entire evening, that she had checked on him twice. The boy sitting in my kitchen said nothing to contradict her. He only watched me over the rim of his mug with an attention that had nothing childlike in it at all. That was the last normal thing that happened for a long while. The third line on the card concerned the well behind the rectory, sealed decades earlier, its cap bolted down with hardware that didn't match anything else on the property. Do not remove the seal, even to retrieve something dropped. I learned why on a Tuesday in October, when my housekeeper, a widow named Carol Pruitt, who had worked for 3 pastors before me, dropped her rosary down the gap where the bolts had begun to rust loose. She reached for it before I could stop her, and the moment her fingers went past the rim, she went rigid, her whole body locking the way a hand does around something too hot to release. I pulled her back by the collar of her coat. She didn't remember any of it afterward, not the reaching, not the 10 seconds she stood frozen, only a taste in her mouth she described as pennies and standing water. A taste that stayed with her, she told me later, for 11 days. I have tried to explain this to other priests. I cannot. The words come out sounding like a ghost story told at a campfire, and the moment I hear myself say them aloud, I understand why Monsignor Achebe never spoke of it directly either. There is no vocabulary in the seminary for a well that reaches back. The fourth line was the one that broke something loose in me, because it wasn't a warning about an object or a place. It named a person. Never let the widow Halloran into the church after the bell has rung for Compline. I had never heard of a widow Halloran. Millbrook Falls had a population of 608 people, and I had by then met nearly all of them at least once. Nobody I asked would confirm the name. Nobody would deny it either. They only went quiet. The same practiced deliberate quiet I had felt from the very first week. The whole town holding a single breath they'd been holding for longer than I'd been alive. She came on the first Friday of Advent. I know because I remember thinking, absurdly, that at least it wasn't a full moon, as if that detail would have made any of it easier to accept. The bell for Compline had rung 9 minutes earlier. I was extinguishing the last of the votive candles when I heard the side door, the one that always stuck in damp weather, open without the sound it usually made. No scrape of wood against the swollen frame. Only a clean, silent give, as though the door itself had decided to cooperate for the time in its life. She was already halfway down the aisle by the time I turned. Small, dressed in black that had gone the particular gray of fabric left in a closet for 50 years. She did not walk so much as arrive, each step landing without the sound a step should make on old hardwood. I asked her, in the voice I use for frightened parishioners, if I could help her find a seat. She stopped. She turned her head toward me at an angle that took slightly too long, like a machine calibrating itself. And she said my name, my actual first name, one that isn't printed on any parish bulletin, one my own mother rarely used. I did not run. I want that understood. I stood my ground the way the fourth line had told me to, though the card gave no instructions for what to do if she was already inside. I recited the opening of the rite of blessing, the only defense I had memorized well enough to speak without my voice shaking too badly to be understood. Her mouth did not move to answer, but I heard her answer anyway, from somewhere behind me, close to my ear, though she remained 20 feet away the entire time. She asked if I had found all 6 lines yet. I had only found 4. I have not found the 5th or 6th. I have searched that sacristy, that rectory, every drawer and floorboard, and I have found nothing more than what Monsignor Achebe left in that cigar box. I called him once months later, and asked him directly. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he told me some doors close on their own once you stop looking for the handle, and he hung up before I could ask him what that meant. The widow Halloran has not returned since that Friday, though the bell for Compline sometimes rings twice now instead of once. A second fainter toll a half-second behind the first, as if something else in the tower has learned to pull the rope alongside me. I still lock the sacristy door twice, once with the key, and then, without meaning to at first and now without fail, a second time with my shoulder pressed against the wood, the way I watched Monsignor Achebe do on my very first night in that town, before I understood, before any of us ever really understand, what it means to keep door closed on something that already knows your name.